Hi guys, it's me, Chazza HD, and welcome to this weekend review stream of the 2023 Italian Grand Prix that of course happened yesterday. And on reflection, what a race it was. Looking back, now I've had time to watch some highlights and just think back to what happened. Yeah, I would stick with what I said at the end of the race watch along yesterday. Best race of the season we've had so far. Yeah, it's probably not been the most dramatic. Again, Australia earlier this season and the Dutch Grand Prix just over a week ago. More dramatic probably, but in terms of the racing and just from lap 1 to 51, how eventful it was, I would say, yeah, it is the best race of the season. And it's good to see that since Formula 1 has returned, since the summer break, that the racing and just the excitement is a lot more there, and we've got a lot more, it feels like, going on compared to quite a few of the races before the summer break. So good, great to see, and that was, yeah, a really great race. So many battles, of course, for the win between Red Bull and Ferrari. Obviously, two Ferraris battling very hard as well. You had Lewis Hamilton and the Oscar Piastri incident. The two McLarens trying to pass Alex Albon. What else did you have? You had the midfield fight as well, which we saw here and there during the race. But yeah, it was a great race, and of course, how can I forget Sergio Perez coming back from 5th place, overtaking Russell, Leclerc, and Sainz, and Perez definitely back to his best yesterday. But yeah, was a great race. And what we're going to be doing in tonight's stream is going over, normally I'd say the main topic or topics from the race. But really, all we're going to be going through tonight is the battle at Ferrari and look at, should Ferrari have let Charles Leclerc, through past Carlos Sainz, try and secure 2nd place. That's what we're going to get into in this stream, but not quite yet, because of course I want to get through a couple things before we get into that. Just want to say though, of course, hope you guys are doing well after the Grand Prix weekend, and no matter what time zone it is and what part of the world you're from, hope you're all having as best a Monday as possible. Very hot Monday where I'm at, and it seems as though as soon as all the kids have buggered off back to school, the summer has thankfully returned, because I remember back in July, absolutely horrendous. But yeah, we're not going to quite I'm sorry. It's so hot, I'm choking up. What was I going to say? Yeah, we're not going to quite get into the Ferrari stuff just yet. I just wanted to say, though, actually one more thing before we go even further, which is there is a poll running at the top of the live chat. And I've asked you guys, should Ferrari have told Carlos Sainz to let Charles Leclerc through to try and finish in 2nd at Monza? Let me know, yes or no, should they have done that? And of course, I'll get to the poll results at the end of the stream. Yeah, let's get to a couple things before we properly get into tonight's main topic. So here is your top 10 and all your point scorers from the Italian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, 10 wins in a row. It wasn't his greatest drive of the season. He didn't do anything wrong, but the pace difference that he had to the rest of the field was not quite as big as we've seen at other races this season. To be fair, as a driver, you can't really affect how quick you are as a driver compared to the others as much at Monza as you can at Spa, because at Monza it really is about the car and, of course, the straight line speed of the car, the aerodynamic efficiency, of course, of the car as well, if it doesn't have too much drag. So yeah, nonetheless, great performance by Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez 2nd, Red Bull securing a 1-2 on enemy turf, and that is actually Red Bull's only 1-2 finish now that that finish they had yesterday. Their only 1-2 finish at Monza. They did have a 1-2 at Monza in qualifying before. I think 10 years ago with Vettel and Webber. But yeah, in the race, that is the first 1-2 finish they've had at Monza. So nice bit of history there. Plus, Red Bull now have 15 wins in a row. The only team in Formula One history to win 15 consecutive Formula One Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz, as you can see, just about finishing third by less than a couple hundredths, or a couple tenths rather, of a second. Even though, obviously we'll get into, should Ferrari have told Carlos to let Leclerc through to help the team and their overall result. If you look at purely driver versus driver, Carlos Sainz was brilliant and, in my view, deserved the driver of the day. Because, again, his defence against Verstappen for so long, Perez and then even Leclerc, most of his defensive moves were, very, very good. And it was by far, not just the race, but the entire weekend, it was by far his strongest weekend of the year. Yeah, great drive from him. Leclerc finishing fourth. Very important points, though, for Ferrari, as we'll see in a moment with the championship standings. George Russell fifth. Obviously, 12 seconds behind in the end, but that is only because of his 5-second penalty. So in reality, the gap was, was about 7 seconds, which, to be honest, and he did deserve the 5-second penalty, by the way, but to be only on track 7 seconds away from a podium, given how slow the Mercedes was down the straights, as we saw from qualifying, and just how in general I thought they were going to do coming into the weekend, I think is a seriously impressive result by Mercedes. And George Russell, of course, both him and his teammate Lewis Hamilton had 5-second penalties. To beat Lewis Hamilton at the Italian Grand Prix by almost 20 seconds is a very good drive. And yeah, he is definitely one of the drivers of the weekend. And I do hope, rather, that he keeps that up for the rest of the year and gets back more so into the form we saw from him in 2022. Of course, we've seen this season that he's been quite inconsistent. The performance has always been there. He just hasn't quite tapped into it enough. Lewis Hamilton yet finishing in 6th. 18 points for Mercedes, a good takeaway from them. Alex Albon 7th. What a defensive drive from him also. Holding off Lando Norris for, feels like, the entire race in the end. And yeah, Albon 7th. Norris 8th. Fernando Alonso ended up joining the party in the end because of how slow Albon was towards the end, because his tyres had gone off quite a bit. Of course, Albon had pitted earlier for his first and only pit stop, so that's why, again, in the end, they were going so slow, and why Alonso was able to get into that fight but really had no chance of overtaking anyone. And then getting the final point in a great and very underrated drive that I haven't seen anyone talk about, because, to be honest, I think there's a lot of people out there that unfairly hate on him. Valtteri Bottas, what a drive. 14th on the grid he started. I didn't give Alfa Romeo a chance finishing in the points, yet he went and did it, and he finished in the points by about 6 seconds. So yeah, I'd like it if a lot more people out there, gave Valtteri his credit, but of course certain drivers will always get more credit than others, and yeah, Valtteri, I think, has unnecessarily been criticised and hated on for the last couple of years, a bit more excessively than he's actually deserved. And yeah, yesterday was a great drive by the Finn. And yeah, those were the point scorers, and this is how it affects the championships. So, on the driver's side, Max Verstappen is now 145 points clear of Sergio Perez. Now, you may be thinking, surely Max is getting close to winning the title. I've done some calculations, and if my maths is correct, he cannot win the title in Singapore. I don't think mathematically it is possible. But again, if my maths are correct, he can win the championship at Suzuka in 3 weeks' time. What he needs to do, though, is outscore Sergio Perez over the course of the Singapore and Japanese Grand Prix weekends. Those 2 weekends in general, he has to outscore Perez by a total 39 points. So if you do the calculation, Max Verstappen needs to pretty much win both races, get the fastest lap in both races, and Sergio Perez needs to finish, say, 4th place in one race and then not finish in the points in the other race. And if that does happen, then in Japan, for the 2nd year in a row, Max Verstappen will be world champion and take his 3rd world title. Most likely, though, he'll be champion after the Qatar Grand Prix because he needs, I think, 149-point lead at least after the Qatar Grand Prix weekend is finished. Of course, in Qatar, we have a sprint race as well, so a bit more points on offer in Qatar. It'll either be Japan or Qatar where he wins the 3rd title. Probably Qatar, because Perez, his form is a lot better now. And I'd be surprised if he only scored 12 points over the course of the next 2 races. So, most likely it'll be first week of October for Max Verstappen to win that 3rd world title. Fernando Alonso in 3rd still, 6 points clear of Lewis Hamilton in 4th. Carlos Sainz in 5th and quickly catching Hamilton and Alonso ahead. And Charles Leclerc in 6th, 6 points behind his teammate, with George Russell just a couple points behind. That battle still raging on for 5th in the championship. Lando Norris, I still think, will feature in that fight. He's 30 points behind Russell, and we know the McLaren car is very quick, and that at the race tracks we've got coming up, McLaren should be one of the quickest teams, really. So I do expect Lando to rise from 8th place, to be honest. Lance Stroll in 9th, of course. He finished, 16th yesterday. What a shocking performance. And Pierre Gasly still somehow in the top half of the championship. Not Alpine, what was I going to say? Oscar Piastri was heading for 4 points, I think, or 2 points from the race, especially if Hamilton had not made contact with him in the race. Then Oscar would have headed for 2 points, and that 2 points would have been enough to put Oscar into 10th in the championship. So for the moment, Piastri remains 12th in the championship, level on points with Ocon, but only behind because Ocon has a better best race result and a point behind Pierre Gasly. Also, Alexander Albon is only 16 points behind Gasly in the Drivers' Championship, and with the way Williams are at the minute, maybe Alex Albon could probably not finish in the top 10 of the championship. That would be an incredible job by him, but he could finish ahead of both Alpines in the championship, which would be the absolute best I think he could do on the driver's side. But yeah, that's the top end of the championship. And on the constructors' side, Red Bull 310 points clear of Mercedes, an incredible gap, with still 8 races to go in 2023. And Red Bull, with how obviously dominant they've been, and with Sergio Perez especially getting back into form, Red Bull still could be, as I think I said this in my mid-season review, it is possible that Red Bull could end the season on 1,000 or more points, which has never happened before in the history of Formula One. It's going to be close, though, for them to be able to do that, but I think mathematically it might just about still be possible. Mercedes then in second. Mercedes are 45 points clear of Ferrari, I believe. Is that right? Yep, it is. 45 points clear. theoretically, Mercedes should still finish in second. They've got, obviously, the strongest driver lineup on the grid and still a pretty strong car compared to Ferrari, Aston Martin, and McLaren. But yeah, still close enough for Ferrari to have a think about getting second. And Ferrari, yeah, up to third now in the championship and 11 points clear of Aston Martin. At the next race, though, in Singapore, should swing back towards Aston Martin, fight for third, because at the next track, obviously, it is a street circuit, all about corners, and that does suit Aston Martin more. But I think Ferrari might be bringing a new upgrade in Singapore. Maybe even it might even be in Japan. We'll have to see. But I'm pretty sure they are bringing a new upgrade at one of those races. Hopefully for them, it'll be Singapore. But yeah, that fight, of course, will rage on to the end of the season. McLaren in fifth, just over 100 points behind Aston Martin. And yeah, I think, given what I've seen from them in the last couple races, I think realistically, they're not going to finish any higher than fifth, which is not that bad, to be honest, because if they do finish this season in fifth, guys, it means that they will have more wind tunnel time for the first half of next year than Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston Martin. If they start next year with a car as quick as it is now, and as quick as we've seen, at Silverstone, Hungary, places like that, then McLaren could have a very, very strong 2024 season. So, yeah, it wouldn't exactly be the end of the world for them. Alpine in sixth. Williams are, 52 points behind now in seventh place. And, yeah, I'm pretty confident as well that Williams should have secured seventh in the championship now, ahead of the Haas F1 team, who are struggling, of course, massively. So, yeah, great to see Williams having another great day. And maybe if Alpine end the season horribly, which is possible, maybe Williams can catch up and maybe even finish in the top 6 of the championship, which they haven't done since 2017. Haas F1 then in 8th, 1 point clear now only of Alfa Romeo, who vitally got that point with Bottas. And given how the two teams look at the minute, I think Alfa Romeo probably will finish 8th in the championship, because Haas still have not got a car quick enough to be finishing in the points, no matter how well they qualify. And they've also, at the minute, lost a lot of that really strong qualifying speed we saw from earlier in the season. They just haven't... It feels like they almost haven't upgraded their car. They have, of course, factually they have, but they just haven't gone anywhere, have Haas this season. They've just got worse and worse as the season has gone on, which is typical with them, sadly. And then you've got AlphaTauri at the very back of the field. Got to shout out, though, again, Liam Lawson. What a drive yesterday. And Daniel Ricciardo, when he returns, whenever that is, whether it's Singapore, Japan, or Qatar, if Ricciardo doesn't put in enough great performances to get Red Bull, keeping him at AlphaTauri at least for 2024, then surely Liam Lawson needs to be in Formula 1 next year for the AlphaTauri team, because that performance was very good. And I know people may say, well, Yuki Tsunoda's teammate was quicker in qualifying, plus Tsunoda didn't even start the race because of a problem with his car, but Lawson was only a tenth and a half slower than Tsunoda in qualifying, so there was a minimal difference, really, between the two. But yeah, those are the championship standings from, currently, of course, after the Italian Grand Prix. But now, let's get into this main and only real topic of the stream with Ferrari. There you go. Let's, get onto it now. So, of course, they finished in 3rd and 4th. Max Verstappen, I think in reality, was too quick, and Red Bull were too quick in terms of the fight for victory. I don't think Ferrari even if they had swapped the two cars around, would have won. I just don't think that was possible. Red Bull had their number, unfortunately, at Monza yesterday. But in the fight for second, could they have engineered Leclerc past Sainz and held on to second place? Let's get into that. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at the average times from all the teams in the first stint of the race, just to understand how Ferrari's pace was in comparison to Red Bull in the first stint and just how it evolved into the second and final stint of the race itself. So in the first stint, and the stint I've done is between lap 2 and lap 14, the reason I've done it up until lap 14 is because on lap 15, Alex Albon, the first driver in the top 10, made his let me rephrase that. He was the first driver in the top 10 to make a pit stop, which is why I stopped it at lap 14. So in that first stint, Red Bull were slightly quicker than Max Verstappen compared to Ferrari by 0.03 per second, despite Max being behind on the track. Just shows you how quick Red Bull were with Max compared to Ferrari, that it was just inevitable that the move was going to be complete. Very impressive pace, I have to say, from Mercedes in that first stint, only 0.2 of a second slower. Of course, Carlos Sainz leading, during that portion of the race definitely did help them being closer, but still impressive nonetheless. And then you've got, Williams looking impressive. Alonso, I've got to say, in the Aston Martin, very poor pace in that first stint. Only 0.1 of a second quicker than the AlphaTauri. Just shows you, one, with, with Aston Martin, just how slow they were at Monza. But also AlphaTauri, what a surprise package they were. Nobody expected them to be that quick at Monza. But yeah, in the first stint, they were factually matching each other on pace, but Red Bull, of course, were being held up by the Ferrari of Sainz. Max Verstappen eventually got past, and then came the second stint of the race, where it was now Ferrari's job to try and prevent a Red Bull 1-2. So let's get into the data from the second stint of the race. And what I've done is removed Verstappen and put Perez in, and just looked at what his average lap time was between lap 23 and 51. And I have removed, by the way, what the lap time or average lap time was for Alpine, AlphaTauri and Haas, because of course those three teams made a second pit stop, so that would obviously massively skew the data for them and how their pace was in the in this part of the race in comparison to the other teams. So I'm just paying attention here to the teams that only did one pit stop with these selected drivers. So Sergio Perez was on average, despite having to pass Leclerc and Sainz between lap 23 and lap 51, Perez was on average 1/3 of a second quicker than Carlos Sainz. Now, in terms of your opinion, viewpoint, whatever you want to call it, as to how much or could Leclerc rather have made the difference if he was let through by Sainz to keep Perez at bay, it all depends on your view as to how much more quicker per lap do you think Leclerc could have gone compared to Carlos Sainz. And that's what I want to hear from you in the chat. If if Sainz had let Leclerc through, do you think Leclerc would have been 0.2, 0.3 of a second quicker per lap? Or do you think it would have been, half a tenth or even 1/10 of a second, barely a difference really, compared to what, they had before with Sainz and what they had in reality, of course, with Sainz ahead of Leclerc? Because in my view, I think Leclerc, given especially how he was actually, once Carlos Sainz made his only pit stop, Leclerc was really quick on his in-lap and almost got past Sainz with the overcut that he did, and went, I think, immediately a second quicker once Carlos made his pit stop. So, yeah, I think if Sainz and if Ferrari had told Sainz, let, Charles through, I think Leclerc would have had enough speed to hold on to second place. I think he would have probably been 0.2, let's say, of a second quicker per lap than Carlos Sainz was between lap 23 and 51, which was the second and final stint of the race itself. If you guys disagree or agree with that, let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the poll as well. But that's why I do believe that Leclerc should have been let through, because I do think he would have had that extra pace to just about hold on for second place. Because even if Perez had passed Sainz a bit earlier than he did, and of course in this alternate reality I'm creating, I guess, Perez wouldn't have had as hard a work to get up to second place, because of course when he passed Leclerc, I don't think, did he have DRS or not? But he was right behind Carlos Sainz, and he was benefiting at least from a slipstream. So it was quite a bit harder for Perez to pass Leclerc, and wasted time really for him to then pass Carlos Sainz. Eventually, of course, he did. Yeah, Perez would have had an easier time getting past Sainz and probably would have passed him quicker. But would Leclerc in clean, fresh air, would he have had enough pace to hold back Perez? Again, let me know in the chat. For me, it's a marginal thing. I can see people, if they say no, they shouldn't have let Leclerc through because it wouldn't have made a difference. Perez would have been too quick in the end. But I think the viewpoint I now have, a day or so after the race is, on reflection, looking at the data, they probably, in hindsight, and well, not even in hindsight, I mean, we saw it during the race, and I even asked the question, of course, with, if I just go back to these Ferrari pictures quickly, I even asked the question during the race watch along to you guys, should Ferrari do some team orders here and tell Sainz to get out of the way? Because, Leclerc, you could argue at certain points, was being held up quite a bit by Carlos. Again, it's a marginal thing, but yeah, let me know what you think in the chat. But I think definitely they should have made that call. And if it had not paid off at the end, then fine. But I think they would have given themselves definitely a much better chance of finishing in second. They wouldn't have got the double podium, though, moving Leclerc ahead of Sainz, because Sainz, his pace definitely was, dropping off, towards the end of the race. Of course, they didn't end up getting the double podium anyway, but yeah, obviously second is better than third. That's pretty much the point I'm trying to make. If we go back to that data, though, again, got to say, very impressive pace from Mercedes, only a tenth of a second on average slower than Ferrari. If only their straight line speed had been a bit better, I think Mercedes probably could have fought for the podium and maybe even taken the podium yesterday at Monza. Alonso and the Aston Martin was a lot better in the second stint, quicker than McLaren and Williams. You can see Albon, because of him pitting quite a bit earlier than the others. That's why his pace in that second stint was not poor, but just not obviously as good as what it was in the first stint. Alfa Romeo, their pace was pretty decent. We do have to remember, though, that Bottas was one of the final people to pit for their only pit stop, so that definitely did help his average lap times. And yeah, Norris, despite being held up behind Albon, was on average a tenth of a second quicker. It just shows you how quick the McLaren was. And if only Norris was able to get ahead of the Williams, maybe they could have got, a few extra points from the race, and maybe even prevented Lewis Hamilton from finishing in 6th place. Most likely, I think Lando would have finished in 6th place had it not been Albon, being in his way. But in the end, he didn't get the move. He didn't get the move done. He just couldn't He just didn't have enough straight line speed in the end. There was one moment between the two where I think Lando went off the track, and again, it was a very marginal case of did Albon force him off the track. My feeling was that Albon probably didn't leave enough room, but again, it wasn't a clear, obvious a violation by Alex Albon. But yeah, with Ferrari, I think that's what they should have done. They should have moved Leclerc ahead of Sainz. But there's also something else we need to go through between Leclerc and Sainz, which is a couple little wheel-to-wheel moments at the very end of the race where not once, but twice, nearly took each other out of the Italian Grand Prix. Let's go into some screenshots of these incidents. So the first one was at the second chicane, the Della Rosia chicane, I believe it's called. Leclerc was going around the outside. Sainz had the inside line. As you can see here with Leclerc, he's on the outside. Can't see Carlos Sainz yet, but I promise you, it is on the inside line, as you can see now here. And Leclerc now starting to turn in. Sainz, of course, diving back up the inside to try and desperately prevent his teammate from overtaking. Now, I've seen some people say that Sainz really, his driving was poor here, but I'm not necessarily sure it was. I mean, he did go too deep into the corner, so that was the only poor thing, I guess you could say Carlos Sainz did in this particular incident. But in terms of the contact that was made between these two, actually at this corner, it wasn't due to Sainz. It was more of a miscalculation by Leclerc. So you can see here, Leclerc starting to turn in. You can clearly see, though, even though he's starting to turn in, that he is waiting for Sainz to fly up the inside. He's seen him coming. He's now going to try and cut underneath and get a better exit, he hopes, through the second part of the chicane. And you can see here, he's turning as far to the left really as possible, but he's miscalculated it. He's turned too early, slightly too early. We're talking, half a second at most too early in terms of a turn-in from Leclerc. Because if he had maybe not turned in as hard as this at this exact moment and opened up the steering slightly more, Sainz probably goes straight on and Leclerc doesn't hit Sainz. As you can see here, this is where contact was made. You can't see it that well, but if you do watch the actual clip on Twitter of Leclerc's on board, you can see contact is made. Yeah, if he had just opened the steering a slight bit more at this moment, I think Sainz will, again, jump over the chicane. Leclerc, though, would have stayed on track and wouldn't have hit Sainz, and probably either Ferrari or the FIA would have told Carlos to give Leclerc the position, because Carlos either, you could say, overtook Leclerc off the track by going off the track, or you could say that Carlos kept the position by going off the track. But yeah, we move back to that picture. It just turned in too early, hit Carlos Sainz. Wasn't Leclerc's fault. It was just a very slight miscalculation. You have to remember, these reactions, little steering movements, they're happening so quickly that it's very harsh it would be to blame drivers for very small and very, very quick steering movements. Obviously when the pressure, the intensity is so high, especially at the very end of the race where you're fighting for the last place on the podium. So I think it was all fair, really. Yes, Sainz definitely just too deep on the brakes and, of course, jumped over the chicane. But if Leclerc had just not turned in quite as early as he did, I think Leclerc probably would have gone up to third place eventually, even if it took intervention from the team or the stewards, or the race director, of course. And then we have the final lap, heading down in to turn 1. You can see Leclerc with the speedometer on the left-hand side. 350 kilometers an hour he's going at, down into turn 1. This is the last chance, really, he has got to finish on the podium at Monza. Now, Carlos Sainz, he's come over to the inside, but Charles Leclerc at this point, he has decided the only way he's going to get past his teammate is to catch him unawares, and he's decided to go for the dummy. Now, the dummy, we know, is where you make it look like to the driver you're trying to overtake, you're going to go to this part of the track, force them to defend, and then you move to, another part of the track where they weren't expecting, and then you take the position. Of course, Nigel Mansell famously did it against Nelson Piquet. Sebastian Vettel did it a couple times. Remember to Valtteri Bottas in Spain once, where Bottas was dummied into moving to one part of the track, and then Vettel took the other part of the track, the inside line, I believe, into turn one. And that's basically what Leclerc was trying to do here. At this point, he's decided, that's what I'm doing. And you can see that at this point now, as he just begins to slow down and hit the brakes, that Carlos is now moving back over to the left-hand side, because he probably had a quick look at his mirrors and saw that Leclerc was still on the racing line. So at this point, the dummy that Leclerc is throwing to Sainz and that he's trying to pull off is working, and he's now heading for that inside line. But on the next screenshot, and I will admit it is hard to see, you can just start to see Carlos Sainz move back over to the middle or the inside of turn one. And at this point, Leclerc has decided, he is now moved late in the braking zone, braking phase, whatever you want to call it. And I need to now move to the left and just hope to dear God that I don't hit my teammate. And you can see here, this I think is about the moment where he started to lock up. And you can just see how close he is to the back of Sainz. And in the end, this is how close he got to hitting Sainz. And if you look at the speedometer, if I just go across, you can see, he's still on the brakes, coming down obviously from 350 kilometers an hour. Now he's at this exact moment, 137 kilometers an hour. For Leclerc to react the way he did is the skill level is incredible. And he was, and Ferrari were overall very lucky to finish on the podium after what happened here, because on reflection with Carlos Sainz, you can see again, if I just move from this picture to this one, where you can see, goes to the inside, moves back towards the left, then starts to come back to the right. Carlos Sainz nearly caused a mammoth crash and nearly caused Ferrari to lose a podium here. And I am surprised that the stewards did not investigate Carlos for moving under braking, because that's clearly what he did. In the braking zone, moved once he saw what Leclerc was doing, and it nearly caused a massive crash. I mean, the thing is, though, with this moving under braking, is I'm not sure what the stewards would have done. Would they have given a 5-second penalty for dangerous driving? Would they have just given him a black and white flag and a couple penalty points? I don't know what the protocol is, or if this happens, this penalty must be applied. Of course, we know with leaving the track and gaining an advantage or causing a collision, it's just a 5-second penalty. But for this, moving under braking, again, I'm not quite sure what the penalty would be, but I am surprised they didn't look at that, because, dangerous move by Sainz. And you could argue in other moments in the race that he was driving dangerously and moving under braking. There was definitely complaints by Sergio Perez that he was doing that. So, dangerous at the end here from Sainz. Could have ended in a very bad crash. Let me know in the chat, guys, whether you think Carlos Sainz's driving yesterday was, in terms of his defensive driving, it was, very tough, his defense, but do you believe at certain points it was a bit too over the limit and he should have been penalised for moving in the braking zone, which we know is not allowed, and rightfully so. because it can cause massive crashes, which thankfully it didn't here. But yeah, Ferrari, very lucky not to have both cars retire from the race there. And yeah, in hindsight, I mean, third and fourth is still a great result for them, but it probably could have been, and maybe should have been, second and fourth for the Scuderia, which would have been, what, 30 points in total? Again, it's not a massive difference, but it might make a difference in the end between, you know, Ferrari and Aston Martin in terms of who finishes third in the championship. And of course, second is better than third at the end of the day. So yeah, let me know, guys, what you think of all of that in the live chat right now. And of course, in the comments section, if you're watching this after, let me know what you think. And I'll, of course, have a look to see what you guys have to say. But yeah, make sure to post your thoughts in chat and I'll get to your comments in a moment. Just want to say, though, quickly, if you are new to the channel, then don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because, of course, we do qualifying, race watch-alongs on this channel every Grand Prix weekend, and plenty, of course, of F1 content. And here is the next two pieces of content coming your way. On Sunday, I'll be live at 3 p.m, UK time, for what I've put as a Max Verstappen stream. The stream will be about Max Verstappen. I just don't know exactly what the title of the stream is going to be, but the topic is going to be me comparing Max Verstappen's current dominance and how good the dominance is by him to the dominance in the past of Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher, and maybe Ayrton Senna as well. But to be fair with Senna, there wasn't really one particular season where Senna absolutely dominated and won, you know, 80% of the races in a particular season, or nearly 80% of the races in a particular season. So, but definitely with Schumacher, Hamilton, and Vettel, I'll make that comparison. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing on Sunday. And I'm going to be live for that at 3 p.m. UK time. And then a few days later on Thursday, the 14th of September, I'll be live at 8 p.m. UK time for the 2023 Singapore Grand Prix weekend preview. Of course, I'll be doing then a qualifying preview on the Friday, qualifying and practice 3 watch along on the Saturday, and a race preview and watch along on the Sunday. Of course, no Formula 2 in Singapore, no more Formula 2 on the channel until end of November, when we've got the final F2 round of the season in Abu Dhabi. So yeah, again, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And for everybody watching right now, make sure to smash the like button. We have got, 10 likes at the minute? Let's try and get up to 20 plus if we can before the end of the stream. That'd be great if we could. Ruxfoot saying the Max Verstappen stream will finish at least 30 seconds earlier than all the other streams. Yeah, it might be a bit of a long one. To be honest, though, there isn't really anything else going on that weekend or that day. So yeah, it probably will be a longish stream, probably a couple hour stream there. But yeah, we'll see, of course, how long it is in the end. But yeah, I'm going to try and make it as thorough as I can, given, of course, we haven't got a race next week. But yeah, after next weekend, we've got another back-to-back. In 2 weeks, it's then Singapore, then a week after it is the Japanese Grand Prix. And I've got to say, Singapore, I'm looking forward to qualifying in Singapore, but not really looking forward to the race that much, because, I mean, we know what Singapore can be like. At least we know there'll be a safety car, because there's been a safety car in every single race ever in Singapore. Japan, though, very much looking forward to that. I think if we get a dry race, especially at Suzuka, I think we'll get a race possibly as good as we got yesterday at Monza. Anyway, let's get into your comments in the chat, readers. I'll try and read a few if I can. Herman the Tosser says, is Sainz and Leclerc partnership similar to how the Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger was? Not really, because I mean Alesi and Berger, they were never top drivers. They weren't on that, Schumacher, Senna, Prost level of drivers. They were more so of that, Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez type level of drivers. I will say Alesi and Berger are definitely better than Sainz and Perez are. Gerhard Berger especially was a great driver. Jean Alesi on his day was a phenomenally quick driver, but they didn't really, during that time at Ferrari when they had Alesi and Berger as teammates, they didn't really have a number one driver. When Ferrari, they still have, I mean, really, Charles Leclerc is their number one, especially with Fred Vasseur there, who has such a great relationship with him. And Herman also saying, I seriously think Verstappen win the rest of the season's races. It is very possible. I think Red Bull will win every race this season, which of course I know not everyone is going to like, but we'd be witnessing history. And let's be honest, if Red Bull do that, they're probably, you're probably never going to see that again in the rest of Formula One history, or quite possibly, for the rest of the time we're watching Formula One, the next, 10, 20, 30 plus years. So, yeah, it would be a great thing to witness, especially, considering that one team previously came so close to winning every race in a season. McLaren, of course, in 1988. So, yeah, it would be good to see history being made there. And I think in the end, with dominance, I've noticed this, is people like to, reminisce looking back to certain teams' dominance, now, such as, when Ferrari and Michael Schumacher were dominating, and McLaren back in the 80s and to a degree in the 90s were dominating Formula One. But at the time, people were probably just as fed up with it as maybe certain people are now. So I don't think we're really going to appreciate just how great this Red Bull team is until, and I think I said this a couple of days ago actually, I don't think we'll appreciate how great they are really until a few years' time when they stop dominating and possibly stop winning championships. But that won't be probably for a while. Ferrari says Pritas Pengu, I think it is. Haas just not Haas, sorry. Ferrari just didn't have the pace and tyre wear to keep the balls behind. And I would have gone as far as demanding team orders from that battle for third. I think also, yeah, you could make the argument that they should have called team orders anyway to stop them fighting as hard as they were at the end, because again, they came so close to taking each other out. So there's definitely an argument to be made. GSR says, while the racing was enjoyable, I still feel Ferrari should have prioritized second. That being said, I'm pretty sure Ferrari knew it was almost an impossible ask, so let them race. If that's what they were thinking, then yeah, I can see why they think that, because it would have been very tight between Leclerc and Perez for second. But again, it was I think definitely that possibility of them taking second was there. Turbo also saying, I hate to say it and I haven't wanted to believe it, but I think F1 is just going to have to wait until 2026 for a legit chance at the title, and then it'll be more domination. It's F1. Yeah, possibly. I do think Mercedes and Ferrari certainly will close the gap to Red Bull next season, because Ferrari have come out and said next year's car will be a redesign, and they've figured out really what the issues are with this year's car. Mercedes, of course, this current car, where they've changed their side pod concept and design, they've got that on obviously with their old chassis that, they started the season with. And of course, they started the season with the zero pod side, design or concept, whatever you want to call it. So you would think Mercedes and Ferrari will be closer at the start of 2024. Whether they win the championship, though, is a completely different kettle of fish. I think definitely, though, next season, Red Bull are not going to win as many races. I don't think they're going to dominate as hard as this year. And I think next year we will get, different teams obviously winning races, and probably maybe not 3 different teams winning races, but I think definitely it'll be a lot more possible. And next year should definitely be more competitive and more exciting in general at the front of the field. In terms of can McLaren and Aston Martin close the gap to Red Bull, it's a bit more difficult to say with them. I think McLaren can. Of course, they started this year as one of the slowest teams. They didn't make their improvement really until halfway through the season. So, yeah. But yeah, with McLaren, I think probably they'll start the season as close to Red Bull as they are now, let's say. And then Aston Martin, that's a big question mark with them, because obviously they're going to stick with the fundamental design of this year's car because it's worked so well for them. But will they be able to develop enough in the wind tunnel to close the gap? Not quite sure they will. And of course, we have to remember this season, Red Bull still have upgrades to come. Red Bull, they've got an upgrade coming in Singapore that Helmut Marko confirmed to the media a couple days ago that was going to be the case. Why did Ham take out Oscar? Well, it was just a driver mistake. He did apologise for it. Did Lewis? So yeah, it was just a mistake. He just moved over a bit too far, a bit clumsy, Lewis. But yeah, at least he put his hands up and said, "My fault." Let me find some more comments, a few more comments here if I can. Sarah Gar says maybe a Vettel stream seeing that the next race is Singapore, but anyway, I mean, it will be a Vettel stream in a way because we are going to be talking about him quite a bit and, comparing Vettel and Max, but yeah, yeah, we will, of course, discuss, because, of course, Max, the record he has broken, most race wins in a row, was previously held by Sebastian Vettel himself. Turbo says, going back to 2015/16, did you all feel Verstappen could do something like this? For me, I felt the potential was there. 2020 to me was what made me think it was inevitable. After 2015, I knew he was a future world champion because what he was doing at 17 years old was unheard of. He is the greatest 17-year-old racing driver there's ever been. No other driver at 17 comes close to Max Verstappen when he was 17. He was already one of the top few drivers in the world at 17 years old, and of course won his first race at 18. Just, yeah, looking back, incredible what he was doing at such a young age. And yeah, I mean, there were some ups and downs. 2017, 2018. Of course, 2018, he had quite a few downs where he, was causing collisions unnecessarily and just getting it wrong. But thankfully, got over that and really started to come into the Max Verstappen we're seeing now, which is, the brutally consistent and brutally quick and impossible at the minute to beat Max Verstappen. Of course, the car pace does help a bit, but we cannot deny that Max is the best driver in the world right now. That just cannot be denied whatsoever. But yeah, 2020, I think, once I saw the gap between Mercedes and Red Bull throughout that year, and we saw continuously great performance after great performance on a consistent basis from Verstappen. I think that was the year that confirmed to me that Verstappen just needed the car, really, to be able to properly fight for the championship. And, 2021, of course, I mean, factually, yeah, he did win it because of a wrong decision by the race director to pull the safety car in with 1 lap to go. But Max Verstappen, in my view, was the best driver in 2021. I thought he was better than Lewis Hamilton. It was close. They were both phenomenal. They were both driving at an unbelievable all-time great level. But for me, Max was the best driver that year. And ever since, really, 2021, Max Verstappen has been the best driver in Formula One. You could maybe argue since 2020, but Lewis was also amazing in 2020. But yeah, 2021, since then, Max has been the best driver in the world. And it's going to take something monumental for anyone to replace him in the next 10 years as the best driver in the world. The only people I can see at the minute that could do that, given obviously, their team make a much faster car, give them the chance to earn that title, is, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris. I think, I don't think this has been Lando's best year in Formula One, but I think definitely he's got the talent to be able, if he's in the right situation, in terms of the car and the team, I think he's got the potential to be a world champion. Charles Leclerc as well. And when he's actually performing consistently, George Russell. With Oscar Piastri, it's too early to say with him whether he's a, not maybe not too early to say that he'd be a future world champion, but it's too early to say just how great he could be or how great he is at the minute. Because really, we need to wait until, I would say, this time next year to really understand just how good Oscar Piastri is. Because next year I do expect a bit of an improvement from Oscar, even though this year has been so impressive. Laurie Ristogis' Max is frighteningly great. Possibly could eventually emulate Lewis if he wants to continue in F1. Yeah, I think he could absolutely emulate Lewis. And statistically, definitely, I think Max has he's definitely got the potential to end up as the greatest of all time. No doubt about that. Let me just try and find maybe a couple more comments. And then we'll try and get to the end of the stream here. Not too long of a stream tonight, of course. Not, really much to get into, but yeah. Herman says, sadly, Norris will never be in the right team, be champion. Well, let's see. McLaren, thankfully, now have got a front-running car. Really, for the first time in just over 10 years. I know you could maybe argue that in 2021 they had a front-running car, but I don't think it was consistently up there enough for that to really be said about McLaren. So yeah, let's see the next couple years. Let's see whether McLaren, whether there's potential there to maybe offer Lando a championship. Of course, Lando Norris is out of contract at the end of 2025, and also out of contract at the end of 2025 is Lewis Hamilton and George Russell at Mercedes. So if Lando does want to leave and an opening comes up at Mercedes, then that move, I think, will happen pretty quickly. Laurie Rastoga says there are going to be some great drivers who will miss out on winning the winning championships. The caliber of F1 drivers nowadays is as high as it's ever been. Yeah, the level of the drivers, Formula One drivers at the minute, is I would still say I think it's the highest now than it's ever been. I think it's the highest ever in Formula One history. The only other time periods I think you could argue it was just as high, if not higher, was about 2012, say, where we had Vettel, Hamilton, Alonso, Button, Raikkonen, Webber, Schumacher, Rosberg. That was a very stunning top few drivers. Obviously, in the late 80s, you had Senna, Prost, Mansell, Piquet, Berger as well. And then later, obviously, Schumacher joined the party. Even mid-2000s, you had, Schumacher, Alonso, Raikkonen, Montoya. But I'd say, yeah, the minute is the highest level we've ever seen on the driver's side in Formula One history. Because you've got Max, of course, world champion, Lewis, world champion, Alonso, world champion. And then potential world champions, I think you've got Norris, Leclerc, Russell, Piastri. So you've got what? In terms of top drivers, I mean, they're all not on the exact same level. Some are better than others. But on the top tier, you've got, 7 drivers. So, yeah, I think definitely argument can be made that it is the highest quality grid we've had in history. Turbo is the problem. McLaren don't have a works engine deal. It seems made a big difference for Red Bull. McLaren have made a great step, but I wonder if the ceiling is lower being a customer team. The thing is, and I think being a customer team, it's let me try and think how to put this. Being a customer team is only bad depending on the era that you're racing in. For example, the 2014 to 2021 era, it was definitely worse to be a customer team because back then the power unit performance mattered way more than it does now, because now we have an aero formula where all the performance really, because the engines, except for Alpine's engine, the Renault, because it's all the performance really is down to how much downforce the cars have got. That, is what matters. So even if you are a customer team, as long as you build a car that has more grip than the works team, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's why Red Bull, back in the V8 era, were able to win 4 championships with Sebastian Vettel, because even though you had the Renault works team for a couple of years there before Lotus took over, Red Bull had a car that had way more downforce, and back then, of course, it was all about who had the most downforce, and I think engine development back then was frozen, and all the engines basically were equal. So it just depends on the era. For example, at the minute, if McLaren next year build a car quicker than Red Bull, then it doesn't matter that they're a customer team, because as long as they've got, in terms of aero, the best car, they have the best car. But of course, in 2026, it probably will matter again in terms of, are you a customer team or are you a works team? McLaren, of course, have a Mercedes engine deal at the minute. Don't think it's confirmed who they're going to be powered by in 2026, but it looks like it's going to be Mercedes, because you've got Audi, of course, a works team, Ferrari works team, Red Bull powertrain / Ford is basically a works team. And then, you got Ferrari, Mercedes, Alpine, of course, as a works team. Aston Martin have got the Honda deal, and I believe that's a works deal between the two. So yeah, the only customer teams you're going to have in 2026 are probably going to be McLaren, Williams, Haas, AlphaTauri, and Andretti if they get onto the grid. And talking of Andretti, we have still not heard anything, unfortunately, as to will they get onto the grid. Hopefully we hear some news before the end of the year, because of course the year they're aiming to get onto the grid is 2025. So you'd think we would hear something between now and the new year as to will they be on the grid for 2025. I think there's another team as well. Is it Campos Racing who are trying to get onto the F1 grid or something like that. But yeah. Anyway, thank you guys a lot for the comments tonight. Been great to have you guys along for this just an hour-long stream. Just quickly, though, finish up the poll in the chat, which, of course, I've had running all stream long. And I asked you guys, of course, should Ferrari have told Carlos Sainz to let Charles Leclerc through to try and finish second at Monza? And with 31 votes, you guys, with 64% of the vote, voted no. So, yeah. As I said, it's a marginal thing. I can see why you think not. I can see why you'd say, yeah, they should have done it like I think. It's a very 50-50 thing. And it's, not surprised that even though you guys voted no, it wasn't exactly a clear, astounding no. So, yeah, thank you guys for voting in that poll. Again, reminder, my next two pieces of content, next two live streams. This Sunday, I'll be live at 3 p.m. UK time for a stream on Max Verstappen, where we'll be going through just how impressive, maybe, his dominance is. And we will be comparing it, his dominance this year and last year as well, because let's be honest, he did dominate last year as well. And looking at how impressive it is compared to Sebastian Vettel's dominance, Lewis Hamilton's, Michael Schumacher's, and just determining, really, how great Max Verstappen is at the minute after breaking the record for most consecutive race wins in Formula One history. And then a few days after that, 4 days after that, on Thursday the 14th, I'll be live at 8 p.m. UK time for the 2023 Singapore Grand Prix weekend preview. But yeah, that's it for tonight, guys. Thank you for coming along, of course, for all of the content tonight and all of the content since Thursday, because of course this is the 5th day in a row I've been live. Yeah, thank you guys a lot for coming around. Been great to have you, of course. And yeah, before you go, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications bell. Make sure to smash the like button as well before you go. And if you want to keep up with content on this channel, if you've got Twitter, then make sure to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. And if you want to have a place where you can get good notifications for my video streams, all of that stuff, then we have the Discord server. I think there'll probably be a link being posted in the live chat at the moment if you want to join our server to get good notifications. We have about 500 people in that Discord. So if you want to join our community, make sure to do so. But guys, until this Sunday and my Max Verstappen stream, and until the next Grand Prix, of course, on the calendar, the Singapore Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.